Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories. Tonight, let your thoughts drift far from the world you know, into the forgotten woods of an empire long vanished. This is the story of three wanderers, a lost memory, and a spiral that remembers more than time itself. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and step quietly into the past. This is the Forgotten Accord. The Forgotten Accord. The rain had not stopped for 2 days. It fell in soft, endless sheets across the tiled roofs of Ravenna, a city that once ruled the fate of the Western world. Now marble crumbled in the corners of forgotten temples. Mosaics lost their color. Statues of gods watched the streets with blank, moss-draped eyes. Ravaged by time and ruled by memory, Ravenna stood quiet. And beneath one of its broken arches stood Claudius Varro, motionless, soaked, and waiting. His cloak, once deep crimson, had faded into a shade not unlike blood left too long in the sun. His boots were patched. His right hand bore an old scar from a blade that had cut too deeply, years ago, in a fight no one remembered. Once, he commanded men with a nod. Now, he waited on the orders of ghosts. The summons had arrived 2 days ago, in the form of a plain scroll without a wax seal. No official crest. No legion mark. Only 4 words, written in an unfamiliar hand. The library breathes again. He had not needed more. The library of Brucius, thought abandoned, half-burned, or absorbed into some eastern archive, had been silent for decades. It was where senatorial records once whispered alongside forbidden texts no longer spoken of. It was also, he now realized, the last place his former commander had visited before dying in locked quarters. Of natural causes. If it breathed again, someone was exhaling secrets. A figure appeared from the mist, young, lean, with a scholar's satchel and shoulders not used to armor. Sebastianus, son of a senator, younger brother of the one who died. "I'm surprised you came," he said by way of greeting. "You have the look of a man who no longer follows orders." "I follow causes," Claudius replied. "Sometimes they wear letters. Sometimes faces." Sebastianus nodded, solemnly. "He wasn't sick." "Not truly. He left me clues, fragments. References to the library. A passage in Cicero's commentary that shouldn't exist. And this." He pulled from his satchel a folded page, brittle with age, written in a hand so fine it could have been carved. Claudius read it once, then again. Not all truths deserve to be kept. Some must be buried twice. Before he could speak, a third voice broke the stillness. "You're both late." From behind a column stepped Livia Ada, cloaked in green, her black hair braided in the Eastern style, her boots dusty despite the rain. Sebastianus blinked. "Who are?" "She was temple-bound," Claudius said, not surprised. "I remember that face from the shrine of Minerva. Except back then, you held scrolls like they might bite you." "They still do," Livia said simply. "But I've learned which ones bite slower." She stepped closer, her eyes scanning the parchment in Sebastianus's hand. "The library of Brucius is not marked on any imperial map," she continued. "But it exists. I've seen the outer doors. Once." "Then why come with us now?" Claudius asked. "Because this time," she said, "someone is trying to open them." They left Ravenna before the next bell, horses' hooves echoing across worn stones. Fog drifted low across the path like ghosts reluctant to let them pass. Each milestone they passed was chipped, half swallowed by moss. Roman eagles erased. Names gouged out. "The Empire forgets fast," Sebastianus said. "No," Claudius replied. "It just remembers the wrong things." That evening, they made camp near a collapsed watchtower. The fire crackled low as damp wood hissed. Livia sat apart, copying a symbol into a book that never left her side. A spiral, enclosed by lines. "What does it mean?" Sebastianus asked. She paused, then answered. "It's a key. Not to a lock, but to a memory. The library's memory." Claudius raised an eyebrow. "You speak like it's alive." "It might be," she said. "It chose what to keep and what to let rot." If your brother left something there, it hasn't rotted. Later, long after sleep had settled over their camp, Claudius stood watch, one hand resting on the hilt of his blade. Somewhere beyond the trees, an owl cried once. Then silence. He didn't believe in omens. But the stillness tonight felt chosen. And the library, wherever it waited, was listening. They reached the river by noon. It was not grand, not like the Tiber or the Rhine, but it wound between hills with the slow purpose of something older than maps. Its waters were muddy and brown, scattered with petals from distant almond trees. But what struck Claudius most was the way the wind changed when they approached. The forest went quiet, as if the river listened. "Is this it?" Sebastianus asked, peering over the edge where stones marked the old ford. "No bridge," Livia muttered. "There used to be one." Claudius knelt by the bank. The old stone pilings remained, stumps covered in moss, barely peeking above the surface. "We walk," he said. They removed their boots, tied them to their packs, and stepped into the shallows. The cold hit fast, curling around calves and knees like fingers. The current wasn't strong, just steady, like something persistent and patient. Halfway through, Sebastianus spoke. "My brother once wrote of a river that remembers names." Claudius glanced over. "A metaphor." Sebastianus looked down. He said, "If you lie while crossing, it pulls you under." The current tugged at his knees. "I hope you're honest men," Livia said from ahead. The village on the far bank was barely more than a cluster of stone walls and half-standing roofs. Chickens scattered as they approached. A dog barked once, then retreated into shadow. Smoke curled from one chimney. Just one. "This isn't on the map," Claudius noted. "It's not meant to be," Livia replied. A man appeared in the lane, old, with shoulders like cracked pillars and a face lined like ancient wood. He watched them without blinking. "You've crossed the river," he said. "We're passing through," Sebastianus offered politely. "On the way to the library," the man finished. None of them responded. "You're not the first," he added. "But you might be the last." The village had no name, or none the old man would give. He introduced himself only as Faustus, and invited them to stay for a warm meal before dusk. Claudius mistrusted hospitality, especially unasked, but he said nothing as they followed Faustus into a low stone house that smelled of garlic, herbs, and old parchment. "The library once sent men here," Faustus said, ladling stew into wooden bowls. "In the days when Rome still listened." "You served them?" Livia asked. "I answered their questions," he replied. "Even when they didn't like the answers." Sebastianus stirred his food. "Did any of them mention a senator?" "Many senators came," Faustus said. "But only one walked here alone. Middle height. Ink-stained hands. Voice like dry bread." Claudius looked up. "And?" he asked for names. "What names?" Faustus didn't answer directly. He turned toward the fireplace and added another log. "Some things the river forgets," he said. "But it never lets go entirely." After supper, they sat in the courtyard as dusk fell. Bats darted in and out of the eaves. The sky faded to indigo. That's when the girl appeared. She couldn't have been more than 10. Barefoot. Brown eyes too big for her face. She stood by the garden wall, watching silently. "Who's that?" Sebastianus asked. Faustus looked. "That's Mira. My granddaughter." The girl stepped forward slowly, then stopped directly in front of Sebastianus. She tilted her head, studying him. "You came back," she said. Sebastianus blinked. "I've never." "You look different then," she interrupted. "But I remember your eyes." Livia stood. "What do you mean, child?" Mira shrugged. "You were here when I was a baby. Papa says that's impossible. But I remember." Faustus cleared his throat. Myra's mother dreamed too much. The child inherited strange memories. But Livia didn't look away from the girl. "Did I speak to you?" Sebastianus asked gently. Mira nodded. "You said not to let anyone near the well." They all turned. There was a well in the corner of the courtyard. Low. Covered. Padlocked. Claudius stepped toward it. Faustus raised a hand. Leave it be. That's not for your kind. And what kind is that? The kind that leaves and returns with questions. They didn't sleep easily. That night Claudius heard whispers in the dark, not from the wind, but from beneath the floorboards. Not words. Not warnings. Just breath. Livia stayed awake, drawing the well and marking a spiral around it. Sebastianus dreamed of water rising through stone, and of voices calling his name, but not in Latin. In the morning, they found Mira waiting by the path. You'll need this, she said, handing Sebastianus a dried flower tucked into folded paper. Inside was a name. A senator's name. His brother's. In a child's hand. No one knew how she'd learned to write it. And when they turned to ask Faustus, the house was empty. Abandoned. Dust on every surface. As if no one had lived there in years. And the well? Unlocked. But dry. The road east of the nameless village narrowed into a crooked path, barely more than a trail, flanked by cypress trees whose branches drooped like tired arms. The wind was gentler here, but every so often it carried the smell of something damp and old, like parchment sealed too long. They walked in silence. Sebastianus kept looking over his shoulder. Livia studied the horizon ahead as if expecting it to fold in on itself. Claudius, as always, led the group, head steady, blade strapped to his back, shoulders drawn like a map of every war he never got to finish. No one spoke of what happened in the village. Not of the empty house. Not of the dry well. Not of the little girl who'd written a name she shouldn't know. I've seen this tree before, Claudius muttered, pointing toward a twisted cedar, its base blackened by an old burned scar. Sebastianus caught up beside him. You said that yesterday. It was in a dream, Claudius said. But I'm starting to think the dream wasn't mine. They said nothing more. Then the trail split. One path was narrow but clear. The other was overgrown, choked with vines, stones scattered across the dirt, half-eaten by moss. The decision seemed obvious. Until they saw him. The man sat on a flat stone between the forks, arms crossed over his knees, head bowed as if dozing. His cloak was torn and dusted with ash, but his posture was relaxed. He looked like he had always been there. Like he belonged to the trail. When they drew close, he lifted his head slowly and smiled. You took longer than I thought, he said. But time's never been strict with me. Sebastianus stepped forward cautiously. We don't know you. That depends on how you count knowing, the man said. Names or memories? Both, Claudius said, hand on his belt. The man nodded, as though satisfied by the suspicion. Gallus, he said. Or I was once. Doesn't matter much anymore. You live out here? Livia asked, arms folded. I walk. I don't live, he replied. The road doesn't hold me long. There was something strange in his voice, not mystical, not dramatic. Just certain. It carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much, spoken too little, and had long since stopped trying to explain either. You know this area? Sebastianus asked. We're heading to the Library of Britius, Gallus said. I know. That froze them. Then you know the way? Claudius asked. Gallus didn't answer right away. He pointed to the overgrown path. That way, he said. If the library still wants you. Livia frowned. You speak as if the building thinks. I said the library. Not the building. They hesitated. Gallus stood, stretched his back, and slung a cloth pouch over one shoulder. It looked empty. You're coming with us? Claudius asked. Gallus smiled. I've walked ahead of you before. Now I'll walk beside. That doesn't make sense, Sebastianus muttered. Gallus looked at him, and his gaze was suddenly sharp, sober. One of you won't make it to the gates. A silence thicker than fog wrapped around them. Who? Livia asked. Gallus looked down the path. You'll know, he said, when the trees stop whispering. They walked in uneasy silence for the next hour. The overgrown trail twisted through a forest deeper than any they'd passed. Branches clawed at their sleeves. Roots coiled like sleeping serpents. Sebastianus fell back beside Livia. Do you believe him? She didn't answer right away. Then, no. But the land might. At nightfall, they camped beneath the ruins of a collapsed waystone, its Latin inscription eaten away by centuries. Gallus sat alone beside the fire, staring not into the flames, but past them. Livia approached, sitting across from him. You said we've walked together. Gallus nodded. Then tell me who dies. I didn't say someone dies, Gallus replied. I said one of you won't reach the gates. That's not the same thing. He looked her in the eyes. No. It's worse. Meanwhile, Sebastianus lay on his cloak beneath a leaning tree. He turned the dried flower in his hands again, the one given by Mira. Folded inside, the child's writing was still there. His brother's name. But now, something new had appeared. A second spiral. Drawn faintly, in what looked like ash. He didn't tell the others. But he didn't sleep. Before dawn, as the first pale blue crept through the trees, Claudius stood guard, sword across his knees. He watched the forest breathe. He listened. And heard nothing. The whispering of leaves had stopped. Just like Gallus said. They found the temple just after noon. Unlike the shrines of the empire, meant to rise, to boast, to pierce the sky, this one seemed built to hide. Dug deep into a forested hill, half covered in ivy and mud, its face was stoic stone and shadow. No road led here. No offering bowl. No name etched in marble. Only a spiral, carved into the keystone above the entrance. Not decorative. Not divine. Just there. A symbol that watched. Livia stood first at the threshold. It's not a temple, she said. Sebastianus blinked. It has the shape of one. No altar. No entrance for processions. No light shafts. This was built to hold something in, not invite worship. Gallus, who had not spoken since morning, nodded quietly. She's right. Claudius pressed his hand to the doorway. The stone felt strangely warm, even in the shaded cold. Let's not linger. They searched the entrance carefully. Eventually, beneath a low stone bench, Livia discovered a rusted lever, hidden behind a false brick. With a groan like an ancient sigh, the stone doors unsealed. Inside, the air was still, thick, and dry. It smelled of earth and parchment, and something metallic. A large circular chamber awaited them, lit only by what little daylight filtered down through cracks in the ceiling far above. At its center stood a low, obsidian pedestal. On top of it, a sealed black door, inlaid with a spiral of bronze. The spiral again. Always the spiral. Sebastianus stepped forward, eyes drawn to the inscription above the vault door. Open not with hands, nor with tools, but with the name you never speak. He turned to the others. It's a test. Or a threat, Claudius muttered. Gallus approached the pedestal slowly, his fingers brushing the rim. The spiral isn't decoration. It's function. A gate made of memory. Livia crossed her arms. And whose memory do we offer? They set up camp in the chamber that night. The stone floor was cold beneath their cloaks, and the torchlight painted long shadows that shifted even when no one moved. Sebastianus sat near the pedestal, Myra's folded page in his hand again. He whispered aloud the names he had carried in his heart for years. Flavian. Nothing. Marcus Flavian. Still silence. Gallus watched him quietly from across the room. It's not the name of the dead, he said. It's the name you buried to survive. Sebastianus frowned. You speak like you know it. Gallus smiled, almost kindly. We all do. We just pretend not to. The others slept in turns. But Sebastianus did not. He sat in the dark, fingers trembling, until, almost without thought, he whispered a name he hadn't spoken aloud since he was a child. A name not from state records or family scrolls, A name whispered once in a dream by someone who told him to forget it. Aetius. The spiral shimmered. Just slightly. A soft hum vibrated through the stone. The door unsealed. They all woke to the sound, subtle, like air being drawn in through teeth. The vault shifted open, revealing a stairwell spiraling downward into pale blue darkness. No torch was needed. The stone glowed faintly with some internal light, as if it remembered stars. They descended slowly. Carefully. Each step was quiet. Too quiet. Even their breathing felt unwelcome. At the bottom waited a second chamber. Smaller. Colder. Lined with stone etched not in Latin, but in some looping, curved script that danced like wind on water. At its center sat a pedestal of black glass. Upon it, a single scroll. Bound in bronze wire, untouched by dust. Livia reached toward it, then stopped. It's warm. Like the gate, Claudius said. No, she corrected. Like something listening. They did not open it. Not yet. Instead, they sat in a quiet circle back in the upper chamber, fire burning low, each staring at the scroll from a distance, as if it were alive. Sebastianus didn't speak. He held Myra's drawing tight in his palm. Livia wrote in her journal again, the spiral, 3 times, then crossed out each. Claudius sat sharpening his blade out of habit more than need. And Gallus? Gallus looked at the fire and said softly, There's no record in that scroll. No decree. No memory. The others turned. It's a letter, he said. Written for someone here. But sent from a time that should not yet be. That night, one of them dreamed of fire rising over Ravenna. Another saw a library burning from within. And one, though they would not say, dreamed of a voice whispering, We never sealed it to protect the knowledge. We sealed it to protect you from what knew it. They opened the scroll at dawn. It had waited too long. The fire had burned low, and the mist of the forest curled around the broken vault like breath held in suspense. The bronze wire unwound with a faint click, as if something within had just been released. Sebastianus unrolled it slowly, reverently. The parchment felt old, older than his brother's death, older than the war they didn't speak of. And yet, the ink was fresh. It shimmered faintly in the firelight, tinged with violet, as though written under a sky not yet born. He read silently at first, then aloud. If this reaches you, then the fracture has not yet come. The Empire breathes still, though faintly. I write from the ruins of a place once known to you. Claudius and Livia leaned in. Sebastianus paused. His throat tightened. I write because they are returning, not from across the sea, but from beneath it. We opened something beneath the salt, beneath the city's spine, where roots do not grow but something older does. Gallus's face darkened. Livia whispered, It's not a letter. It's a confession. Sebastianus read on. We believed it could be named, described, controlled. But the spiral was never meant to be mapped. It existed before script, before truth had form. Claudius folded his arms. He's describing an idea. No, Livia said. He's describing a presence. Sebastianus turned the scroll over, finding new lines written vertically along the edge in a cramped, hurried hand. Tell Claudius to walk west. If he doesn't, they'll find him in the river. Everything stopped. Even the fire seemed to still. Claudius stared at the words, his name now burning in the dim morning light. He wrote this before I even agreed to come. Before he could have known I'd leave my post. Sebastianus looked up. He named you. Personally. Gallus broke the silence. There are memories not made yet. But already returned. That afternoon, the fever began. At first, Sebastianus dismissed it as nothing, too much strain, too little rest. But as they walked, his steps slowed. His breath shortened. The light behind his eyes dimmed. Claudius offered to carry his pack, but Sebastianus refused. By dusk, his hands were shaking. Livia forced him to sit. She laid a damp cloth across his brow. Your pulse is too fast, she said. But your skin is cold. Sebastianus tried to smile. Just the price of forbidden knowledge? Gallus rummaged silently through a leather pouch. He pulled free a folded packet of dried herbs and mixed them with boiling water. I've seen this before, he said at last. Not an illness. A tether. To what? Claudius asked. Gallus stirred the brew slowly. To something watching. They made camp again, this time beside a crooked stream that curved like a question mark through the forest floor. That night, Sebastianus slept with the scroll beneath his cloak, curled against his chest. Livia sat beside him for hours, feeding the fire, eyes never leaving his face. When she finally lay down, exhausted, she dreamed. Of the library, burning from within. Of a spiral made of bone. Of a voice behind her saying, "He spoke too soon." Claudius did not sleep. He sat on a stone, sword across his knees, and read the scroll over and over. The words did not change. But he did. The more he read, the more he felt something pressing. Like memory forming before experience. Like a moment from the future crouching in the dark, waiting to pounce. And then came the whisper. Soft. From the trees. His name. Claudius. He stood slowly. Behind him, the others stirred, but did not wake. The voice came again. Walk west. He looked west, only shadows. But his feet moved before thought followed. He stepped through the undergrowth and found himself at the edge of the stream. Its waters were black in the moonlight. He crouched. And in the reflection, he saw not his face, but his brother's. Long dead. Smiling. And mouthing a word Claudius could not hear. He returned to the fire pale and silent. Gallus watched him, eyes glinting. You saw something, the old man said. I saw what the water remembered. Claudius replied. But not what I needed. By morning, Sebastianus's fever broke. He sat upright, smiling faintly. I feel better. But when he looked at his hands, his veins had darkened. Just slightly. Just enough. And beneath the skin of his right palm, the spiral had appeared. Barely visible. But pulsing. They reached the river again on the third day of travel. But it no longer looked like the one they had crossed before. It was wider now, slower, less a river and more a mirror. The surface was unnaturally still, broken only by the occasional fall of a leaf or the sigh of the wind. Trees along the banks leaned in as if listening. Mist clung to the water like breath that would not lift. They stopped on a hillock overlooking the bend. Below them stood a broken bridge. Its center was gone, devoured by water or time. Its stone ends hung like severed limbs, a warning against passing too far. On the far bank, ruins whispered in silence, half-standing cottages, scorched beams, and a bell tower cracked straight through. This was Verentium, Gallus said. Livia furrowed her brow. That name isn't on any map. It was removed, Gallus said. First by fire. Then by decree. Claudius frowned. Who erases a village? Someone who wants to forget what it remembered. They descended the hill carefully. As they reached the bank, the wind grew colder, carrying the scent of stone and ash. Claudius crouched near the water. There's something carved into this rock. Livia joined him, brushing away moss. A faint inscription glimmered under the wet stone. Not all who cross forget. They followed the shoreline, looking for a place to camp. A few hundred paces east, the ruins thinned, giving way to a wide ledge where the river curved like a sickle. It was there that Sebastianus stopped walking. He stood still, staring into the water. Do you hear that? He asked. Livia turned. Hear what? He didn't move. The voices. Gallus looked sharply at him, then at the river. What are they saying? Claudius asked. Sebastianus swallowed. My name. Not the one you know. He stepped forward. The others tensed. Livia moved toward him carefully. The name from the vault? Sebastianus nodded. Aetius. I didn't tell the river. But she knows. The surface of the water shifted, not from wind, but from form. Leaves spun in a tight circle. Then, for just a breath, they settled into a spiral. And dissolved. They camped near the ruins of a stone column that night, just uphill from the river. The air felt thinner, as if something beneath the surface pulled breath into itself. Sebastianus said little. He stared into the flames, fingers twitching. When he finally laid down, it was close to the water. Livia kept watch beside him. I dreamed this place, he whispered, not looking at her. Before we ever left Ravenna. She said nothing. In the dream, I was underwater. I couldn't breathe, but I didn't need to. There were names carved into the riverbed. Mine was the last. He turned to her. And then I saw yours. Livia met his gaze. For once, she didn't mask the tremor in her breath. You've been here before, he said. I was a child. She stood and walked away before he could ask more. Claudius took second watch. He sat by the fire, blade across his knees, listening. The forest murmured, then fell still. And from behind him, at the river's edge, a voice spoke his name. Claudius. He stood. The others didn't stir. Again. Walk west. He turned. Mist curled along the bank. But no one stood there. Only water. And in its reflection, not his own face, but his brother's. Long dead. Smiling. Mouth moving in silence. He returned to camp pale. Gallus met his eyes. You heard her. She used his voice. Gallus nodded. She remembers those we lose. That's how she calls us. By morning, the river had receded nearly a foot. Claudius and Livia walked to the new edge and found something carved freshly into the exposed stones. One of you already crossed. They looked up. Sebastianus was gone. His bedroll lay folded. His pack untouched. But his footprints, bare, led toward the water. Not rushed. Not stumbled. Calm. Deliberate. They vanished at the edge. Claudius swore softly. He was taken. No, Gallus said. He was allowed. Livia's jaw tightened. Then we go after him. Gallus stepped in front of her. She let him pass. But not all of us will be invited. Then we demand entry. Gallus shook his head. That is not how the river works. Claudius stepped toward the water. So what now? Gallus looked downriver, toward the mist that wrapped the shattered bell tower. There's a path, he said. But it does not begin here. Sebastianus woke to silence. It was not the silence of nature. Not the hush of nightfall or fog. It was the kind of silence that waits. A silence with shape and direction. Like breath held behind a wall. He opened his eyes. Above him, a sky the color of parchment soaked in moonlight. No clouds. No sun. No wind. Around him, marble stones, half buried in ash and dust. A temple dome loomed nearby, cracked through the center yet still standing. Not ruins. Not quite. He sat up slowly. There were no birds. No insects. No motion. Only one thing stirred. A voice, inside his head. Female. Calm. Ancient. Aetius, it said. At last. Elsewhere, far beneath the waking world, Livia and Claudius followed Gallus down a hidden stair behind the river bend, a place no map acknowledged. The stair opened into a wide chamber lit by flickering torches set in iron sconces. The walls were carved with spirals and stars, but the stars were unfamiliar. Not Roman constellations. Symbols older than them. Older than names. At the far end stood a man. Robed in deep indigo, hood drawn back, face thin and lined, eyes bright with sleepless memory. You came, he said. At last. Claudius stopped first. His hand hovered near his blade. Who are you? I am a keeper, the man said. Some called me archivist. Others never had the chance. Gallus bowed his head slightly, not in deference, but recognition. I saw your name once, Livia said. In a scroll fragment in Ravenna. You were listed as missing. Presumed dead. He smiled gently. That was a kindness. Back in the quiet world, Sebastianus stood before the fractured dome. Its entrance was open, but no debris blocked the path. Inside, rows of pillars, each etched with spirals and curving script. No torchlight. And yet the hall glowed softly, lit by something beneath the floor. Or within it. At the center, a circular basin of black stone, filled with water so still it seemed painted. He approached it slowly. In the reflection, his face. Then, flickering, his brother's. Then Livia. And then another face. Older. Worn. But his own. In the chamber below, the archivist gestured for Livia and Claudius to come closer. He crossed the river, he said, and entered a memory. That place is real? Livia asked. He nodded. And not. Claudius frowned. Then how do we find him? You don't, the archivist said. You remember him. Gallus looked up. He's not lost. Not yet. But if he forgets who he is, the archivist continued, he will stay there. And change. The basin shimmered. Sebastianus knelt beside it. Where is this? The voice inside him replied. You are within what remains. This is not a dream. This is where those who crossed were buried, not in earth, but in time. He leaned closer. And in the dark of the water saw footsteps, stone stairs spiraling downward. He blinked. And they were beneath him. In the chamber of the archivist, a pulse of cold rippled across the floor. Livia stepped back. What was that? The archivist turned. Someone just opened a door. Sebastianus descended the staircase that hadn't been there a moment ago. The air grew colder. The light dimmed. Symbols moved across the walls, not carved, but shifting like breath across glass. At the bottom of the stair, a wide hall awaited. And at its far end, a man stood, waiting. Who are you? Sebastianus asked. The man turned. And Sebastianus felt his knees weaken. I know you, he whispered. I saw you in the scroll, the man said. In your brother's letter. But not by name. Claudius turned sharply in the archive chamber. He'd felt something, a pull, like a thread tugged at the base of his skull. What did you mean, if he changes? He asked the archivist. The man's gaze was heavy. He will become what the spiral remembers. Not himself. Not fully. Only the part the memory chooses to keep. Livia looked horrified. Then he won't come back. Not unless you go after him, the archivist said. And remember him more strongly than the place does. In the memory world, the man stepped closer to Sebastianus. You are the second to come here, he said. The first? Sebastianus asked. The man's face twitched, pained. The first tried to burn the memory out. He paused. And failed. Sebastianus stood face to face with himself. The man before him looked identical. Same jawline, same faint scar above the brow, same eyes. But something inside those eyes was gone. Like the candle of thought had been snuffed, leaving only memory to flicker in its place. You're me, Sebastianus said softly. The figure nodded once. I was. He circled the echoes slowly. And now? I am what the spiral remembers. A name without a voice. A page never turned. Far below the world of dreams, Livia and Claudius descended the second spiral, the one behind the archivist's chamber. It was narrower. Older. The steps were damp, worn by time, and faintly warm to the touch, as if memories still moved through them like blood in veins. As they reached the base, a chamber opened into darkness, a great stone vault without torches, but pulsing with dim, natural light that seeped from the carvings on the walls. Claudius muttered, This isn't a place. It's a wound. Livia walked forward. Or a heart. In the memory world, Sebastianus stood inside the ruined dome. Around him, 12 pillars stood in a perfect ring, each carved with symbols that shimmered as he looked at them, shifting between alphabets. Latin, then Greek, then something older, no longer used. Maybe never spoken. You've walked far, the echo said. I was brought here. No, it said, stepping closer. You wanted to come. Livia touched one of the glowing walls. Her fingertips burned, not with heat, but with grief. In a blink, the chamber fell away. She stood in the atrium of her childhood home, sunlight spilling through the roof. Her mother stood in the doorway, smiling with sadness in her eyes. Don't chase ghosts, Livia, her mother said. They remember you too well. I'm not a child anymore. Livia whispered. No, her mother said. But the child still lives in here. She pointed to Livia's chest. Then the vision shattered. Claudius stepped into a narrow corridor beyond the vault, and the world changed. He was back in the southern front, standing over the body of a man he once called friend. Titus. A soldier who'd saved him twice, and whom Claudius had left behind to hold the pass. Blood soaked the stones. Coward, a voice hissed. Claudius turned. But the voice was his own. He stood across from himself, younger, hands clean. You survived, the younger said. But at what cost? In the dome, Sebastianus began to shake. The echo was circling him now, closer. You see, it said. You are not strong enough to leave. I'm not here to prove strength. Sebastianus answered. Then why did you return? I never left. He whispered. Part of me has always been here. The echo stopped. For a moment it looked afraid. Livia returned from her vision breathless. She touched her chest where her mother had pointed, and felt a pulse not her own. Claudius stumbled out from the corridor. Sweat beaded his brow. I saw myself. Me too, she said. And? I hated her, Livia said. But I needed her. They turned toward the basin at the center of the room, where the spiral began to glow. In the dome, Sebastianus dropped to his knees. I remember, he said. My brother's laughter. Myra's flower. Livia's voice when she recites Virgil. The echo trembled. I am not yours, Sebastianus said. Then louder. I am not your memory. The spiral beneath his feet cracked. A sound like thunder split the silence. Back in the vault, the basin shattered. Light exploded across the room. Claudius shielded his eyes. Livia fell to one knee. Then, from the smoke, a body. Sebastianus. Gasping. Alive. But different. Gallus arrived, breathless. He saw Sebastianus and dropped to one knee. You brought something back, he whispered. Sebastianus blinked. What? Claudius and Livia helped him sit upright. But on his back, just beneath the shoulder blade, the skin shimmered. A spiral. Slowly rotating, just under the surface. Claudius reached to touch it. Sebastianus flinched. It's cold, Livia whispered. It wasn't there before. No, Gallus said. It wasn't supposed to come back. Sebastianus turned to them, voice hoarse. There was someone else. Another version of me. He stayed too long, Gallus said. And now? Gallus looked him in the eye. Now you're not the only one who walked out. The spiral on Sebastianus's back would not fade. It pulsed, not like a wound, but like a beacon. A signal. It glowed faintly in darkness and shimmered when silence settled. He said he felt fine. But his eyes no longer matched his voice. That night, they camped far from the vault. The sky hung low and empty above them, stars hidden by thick cloud. Gallus brewed a tea of ash root and dried mint, something to quiet the mind. But Sebastianus didn't drink. Instead, he sat by the fire, unmoving, watching the flames as if trying to read them. You've barely said a word, Livia said, approaching. I've been listening, he replied. To what? Sebastianus blinked slowly. To what's coming? Later, as the others slept, Claudius kept watch. He'd known men like this before, after the wars, the sieges, the famine years. Men who returned but were never truly home. But this was different. This was someone remembering something that wasn't his. Just before dawn, Claudius woke to a sound. Murmuring. He turned and saw Sebastianus crouched by the edge of the trees, whispering to the dirt. Claudius stood, stepped closer. The words were not Latin, nor Greek. They shifted, syllables folding over each other like waves. Sebastianus, he said sharply. The man froze. Then looked up. But the eyes were wrong. Too dark. Too calm. I didn't mean to speak aloud, Sebastianus said. She teaches in dreams. But sometimes it leaks out. Who? Claudius demanded. Sebastianus tilted his head. The one who remembers before there were names. By morning, the spiral had grown. Not larger, but deeper. It had begun to sink, pulling at the skin. Livia examined it with trembling hands. It's not ink. It's alive. It's becoming him, Gallus said softly. No, Livia snapped. He's still here. But when she looked into Sebastianus's eyes, she saw a flicker of doubt behind his calm. Do you remember my mother's name? She asked suddenly. Sebastianus frowned. Amara. Livia nodded. And the name of the inn where we first met? Silence. Sebastianus blinked once, then said, That's not important. They left the camp in silence. The archivist met them at the edge of the old road, flanked by 2 ancient pine trees that had not borne needles in decades. I felt it begin, he said. The rewriting. Rewriting? Claudius asked. When memory no longer reflects truth, the archivist explained. It begins to write its own. He turned to Sebastianus. The spiral is not consuming you. It is drafting you. Sebastianus sat apart from the group for most of the day, staring at the road ahead. Once he muttered something. A prayer? A poem? Livia leaned closer to hear. He was speaking in the voice of her old teacher, a man he'd never met, and quoting a line only shared in private. She backed away. You're remembering my life. Sebastianus looked up, startled. I didn't mean to. It just came. Like a breeze. That evening, the trees darkened before the sun did. The sky turned gray, then violet, then too still. Gallus whispered. It started. What has? Claudius asked. Gallus pointed to Sebastianus. The spiral is listening. And it's ready to speak. Just before sleep, Livia sat beside Sebastianus. Do you know who I am? He turned to her. And for a moment, too long, he said nothing. Then, softly, You were a voice I followed. That night, Sebastianus dreamed. He walked alone across a field of black water, stars beneath his feet. Voices called to him, names he didn't know. Faces with no mouths. Then a great spiral rose above the water, and it whispered. You will be the first to remember backwards. He woke in a sweat. And the spiral had split. 2 ends now curled beneath the skin, forming a pattern that resembled an open eye. Claudius saw it first. We're running out of time, he said. Livia nodded, silent. Gallus closed his eyes. There may still be a way. But he must choose it before the spiral finishes the sentence. The name came to Livia like a breath she hadn't taken yet. It had no origin, no meaning. And yet, she recognized it the moment Sebastianus whispered it in his sleep. Serovius. It was not Latin, not Greek, not from any scroll in the temples of her youth. But something within her knew, this name was never meant to be given, only remembered. She stood beside Sebastianus, heart racing. The spiral on his back had widened overnight, its center now open like a flower of ink. Beneath the skin, not blood, not bone, but light. Slow-moving. Alive. Gallus sat across the fire, his eyes fixed on the spiral. He's nearly reached the edge, he said. Of what? Claudius asked. Gallus didn't blink. Of being remembered. The archivist arrived just before sunrise. He walked into camp as if he'd stepped through the mist itself. When he heard the name Serovius, his face changed. Not in fear. Not surprise. But recognition. Then it's time, he said quietly. They gathered in the lower chamber, below the carved stars and the breathless stone. There, the archivist lit the memory basin again. The water shimmered not with fire, but with memory light, cold and alive. One of you must enter, he said. Into where? Claudius asked. Into the root of the spiral, the archivist replied. Where it first began to remember itself. Livia stepped forward. Let me. No, Claudius said quickly. We don't know what's in there. We know what's already happening out here, she said, pointing to Sebastianus. If we wait, it will finish writing him. And if it writes you too? She placed her hand on his shoulder. Then you must remember me more clearly than it does. She stepped into the basin's light. And vanished. Livia fell. Not through space, but through knowing. The world around her spun, not visually, but structurally. Reality twisted like pages in reverse. When she opened her eyes, she stood in a temple without ceiling or floor. Spirals floated through the air like mist. And a single figure waited at the center. A man. Veiled in smoke. Tall, robed in silver thread. You heard it, he said. The name. Yes, she answered. Serovius. Then you have walked this path before. Meanwhile, above, Claudius watched Sebastianus draw spirals in the dirt. But they had changed again. No longer perfect. Some were broken. Others bled into one another. And one spiral bore a name he never told anyone. Marinus. His brother. The one who died before the wars. Claudius froze. How? Sebastianus looked up. And smiled. In the temple beyond memory, Livia walked beside the veiled man. He spoke in fragments, not language but truth. Names are not given. They are echoed. Serovius was the first to speak the spiral aloud. He was the last to remember what the spiral tried to forget. She stopped. Then why am I here? The man turned to her. Because the spiral remembered you too. The walls of the temple filled with names. Carved in flame, not stone. Some she recognized. Some she feared. 2 more names blinked into being. Sebastianus. Claudius. Then, below them, Livia. And then, Aenery. A name she had never spoken, but had dreamed more than once. Outside, Sebastianus rose to his feet. The spiral on his back now pulsed like a heart. Its edges split open, 4 wings of light rising from his skin like blades. The archivist whispered, The door is opening. Claudius drew his blade. We close it. But Gallus held him back. Not yet. If she fails, you won't be able to. Inside the spiral's heart, the veiled figure turned one final time. He lowered his hood. And she saw her own face. Older. Worn. Eyes dark with memory. I asked once if I could change the ending, her older self said. And now? Livia breathed deeply. I will. The chamber collapsed into light. Livia gasped. And awoke in the real world. Claudius caught her as she stumbled forward from the basin, pale and shaking. Are you? I'm fine, she whispered. Then looked past him. Sebastianus stood, fully awake. The spiral on his back was gone. But his eyes were glowing with silver fire. And he spoke a final line. The accord has been rewritten. The light faded slowly. Not like fire. Not like the sun. Like memory finally exhaling. Livia stood in the center of the chamber, breathing hard. The basin was still. The stones were warm. Beside her, Sebastianus stood tall, calm, but changed. The spiral was gone from his back, but something remained in his gaze, a softness born not of loss, but of understanding. Claudius approached cautiously. Do you know who you are? Sebastianus looked at him. Yes. I am Sebastianus. He paused. But I also remember being Aetius. And the voice of another. Serovius was not just a name. He was a path. Gallus stepped forward. Then the spiral closed? Sebastianus shook his head. No. It uncoiled. They returned to the surface by nightfall. The forest felt lighter. The trees no longer leaned. Even the river's song had changed. Less like whispering, more like singing in sleep. As they broke camp one last time, Claudius lingered. "I saw my brother's name in the spiral," he said to Livia. She nodded. "So did I, mine too. Do you think it means we were part of this from the beginning?" "I think," she said, "that the spiral didn't call us. We were already walking toward it. It just met us there." Sebastianus had grown quieter. He smiled more, but spoke less. He stopped correcting Gallus's stories. He no longer reached for scrolls in his satchel. He said he could still remember everything, and yet some memories now hummed at the edges, not yet ready to be recalled. "Let them rest," Livia had said. He agreed. The archivist met them one final time, beneath a tree that hadn't bloomed in 50 years. He said nothing at first. Just studied each of them like pages in a nearly finished book. Then he spoke. "The accord was not broken. It was forgotten. And now it is returned." Claudius tilted his head. "What does that mean?" The archivist's eyes softened. "It means the memory is at peace. But it will not stay idle forever." Livia stepped forward. "If it wakes again?" The archivist looked to Sebastianus. "Then he will remember what we must forget." That night, as stars blinked open across a clear sky, the three of them sat by the fire for the last time. No spiral. No whisper. Just warmth. Claudius passed around a flask of plum liquor saved for "when it's done." Lydia laughed once. "It's not done." "No," Claudius said. "But we are." When the time came to part, Gallus remained by the river. "I've walked too far to walk back," he said. "You could stay with us," Sebastianus offered. Gallus smiled. "I already stayed once. That's enough." Claudius returned to the northern frontier. The fighting had calmed, but not ended. He no longer feared the silence between battles. He welcomed it. He never drew a spiral again. But sometimes, in the pattern of leaves, or the curl of smoke, he would see it. And nod. Livia traveled east. She taught in temples, then in ruins, then beneath stars. Her scrolls were copied and kept, but she never wrote her name again. Only once, at the end of her final record, did she leave a single word. Aenery. Sebastianus walked west. He passed cities, then towns, then only wild hills. He spoke little. But when a child once asked him why he always looked at the sky before sleeping, he said, "Because sometimes I still hear it breathing." Years later, when the old stones of the spiral vault were unearthed by accident, no one could explain the carvings inside. They weren't in any known script. Not Latin. Not Greek. Not even Etruscan. But one scholar wrote in her notes, "It reads like a memory speaking to itself." And on the final stone at the heart of the vault, one phrase remained. Simple. Untranslated. But when read aloud, it brought calm to every room. We remembered, and we returned. And so the spiral uncoils, and the memory returns to rest. Thank you for joining us on this quiet journey. Through broken stones, whispered names, and the space where sleep and story meet. If this tale brought you peace, leave a like, share it with someone who needs rest. And subscribe to Deep Sleep Stories for more worlds just beyond the edge of dreaming. Until next time, sleep well.